Good afternoon, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee for Monday, April 15th. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues Mitchell Englander, Bill Rosendahl, and Tom Labange, and we are ready to proceed. We're going to hear general public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and as of right now, I only have actually, I don't have any cards for general public comment. Is there anybody here who wish to offer general public comment on an issue not on today's agenda? Seeing none, general public comment is closed. We will be taking the items slightly out of order in deference to the circumstances that are going on right now with Los Angeles Police Department. We'd like to have Chief Moore be able to provide his comments now so he can get back to work. So we're going to take item number 7 out of order, and then we'll go ahead and do our closed session item, and we'll come back and complete the rest. So let's begin with item number 7, please.
Okay, item number 7 is a CEO report relative to an interim financial status report for fiscal year 2012-13.
Your mic's on.
Oh, make sure I speak closer to the mic. There we go. All right. So we asked departments over the last couple weeks whether or not they needed some interim actions before we do the year-end FSR, which we will submit to the committee in late May. But there were several departments that actually need some transactions at this time in order to get them through the year-end report. We provided a very brief summary of some of those actions that are recommended. I'll quickly run through those. We have an adjustment for the city attorney for some grant programs for the PACE and Falcon programs. We also have a transfer between accounts for the convention center due to shows and so forth, so they need to move some money into the as-needed staffing. We do have 2 appropriations from the UB for general services. The one, $2.2 million that for money for petroleum. We have money that still remains in the UB, so we're recommending moving some of that money now to get them through the year end. We also are recommending $2.7 million for their parts account. They have a deficit, and we need to move some money in them so they can pay bills and continue servicing vehicles. We do have a reappropriation for the mayor. We also do have a $1 million appropriation recommended for police department. This has to do with the realignment funding from the state. They will expect to receive probably roughly about $2.2 million from the program. They do need some upfront money of $1 million so they can start paying some overtime. We will be reimbursed next fiscal year. We have several miscellaneous transfers for the Bureau of Sanitation to take care of some accounts within their special funds. We do have a large transfer for street services due to the street program. This moves some money so they can continue that program. And then we also do have some money, some transfers for transportation for various events. We do personnel through their efforts this year have projected a savings in workers' comp. So that money, that $4 million savings that they're projecting, we are recommending that we move it from workers' comp into the UB, reserved for economic uncertainties in case we have other needed shortfalls elsewhere that can be addressed. And then lastly, we're moving some money based for debt service for MICLA. All right. We do have representatives and analysts here to answer any more detailed questions that you might have.
All right.
The $1.55 million related to the Segovia event that we're holding next weekend. Could you just explain briefly that amount of money and how that fits in and how there's some follow-through on that for the future use? Or was there any public-private partnership with this concept? And how does DOT feel about spending the $1.55 million, which I think, of course, I believe in the cyclist program. Could somebody talk to us about that?
William Haverson with the Department of Transportation. The amount of overtime requested for Ciclavia was basically prepared by our engineers who are working closely with the organization that is sponsoring the event. That money is basically to pay for the traffic officers who will be providing traffic control services. And we basically need this money because it wasn't initially anticipated when the current year's budget was adopted.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, members, we're going to have a number of questions, I know, about several of these recommendations. The one that I want to deal with first, though, is police. If any member has any question for LAPD on operational issues relating to the transfer for sworn overtime or otherwise, we'll take those now. If not, I'd like Chief Moore to be able to get back to
just a quick question for Chief Moore. Chief Moore, if you're a manager of a restaurant facility, your regional manager could call you the next day and say, what happened yesterday? Or what are your needs from last week? How in tune is your technology in the police department that gives you the information on the business side of operation, on the overhead side of operation, not on the arrest and staffing in sense, but the business side of the cost? If you call the commander at Northeast right now and ask him the difference between the first 4 months of this year and the last 4 months of the year, does he pull anything out? This is, by the way, my first meeting with a police official in this committee. I just wanted to ask this question always, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon, Assistant Chief Mike Moore with Office of Special Operations. Councilman, relative to overhead, if you will, to a particular area commanding officer, his or her understanding as to expenditure of overtime hours, they have that report in front of them every 2 weeks. This morning, Fiscal Operations does a tremendous job in identifying personnel as well as commands that have FSLA overtime as well as number of hours.
Got it. All right, all I want you to do is have the Detective Sergeant Ito give me a copy. I just want to see one just to become familiar with that business end. Thank you so much.
Very good. And we're joined by Mr. Kretz. Mr. Kretz, hate to put you on the spot right away, but we're doing item number 7 on the transfers, this interim FSR. And if you have questions, particularly for the police department, I'd like to take those first. So Chief Moore has a very busy day right now in light of the events in Boston. So I'd like to have him get back to his post. And just for the sake of clarity, what we're dealing with now is not anything to do with the overall police department's budget. It's simply this matter of the $1 million transfer from the UB that deals with realignment issues that have arisen because of state policy.
Yeah, I don't have any LAPD related questions.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, now let's go to any other questions that members may have for any of the other departments that are mentioned in this report. Any other questions on this matter, members? Sorry?
Yeah, I'm assuming that
were you prepared to provide any other detail on this?
We have analysts in here. If you would like more detail, we can provide more detail on the specific items.
So I think it's question specific, Mr. Englander. So
it's a nice short report.
Yeah.
The only other one I got is the pedestrian program, pedestrian safety, $178,000 from Measure R pedestrian program and pedestrian safety project. I'd just like to have him explain it a little bit briefly to us, what we're doing with the pedestrian program there. Obviously, pedestrians, cyclists, mass transit, and the automobile are our 4 ways of getting around. And I'd like to know how they specifically intend to spend the $178,000 from Measure R for pedestrian program.
So that's for transportation? I think, did transportation already leave?
No, I think he's
No.
gathering his notes.
There, okay.
William Halverson, Department of Transportation. I believe that the transfer mistakenly refers to the Bureau of Street Services. It is indeed, however, requested by the Bureau of Street Lighting. My understanding, Bureau of Street Lighting has already used and has already issued a PO for this material using their Fund 100 account, and as a result, we need to transfer money in order to restore their appropriation. Usual process that we use is to actually issue the PO directly against the Measure R funds. Unfortunately, that process was not followed in this particular instance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything further on this matter, members? All right, very good. Well, then, it will be the recommendation of the committee without objection to approve the CAO's report.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're going to go now to our closed session item. Item number 1, members, is going to be continued, as I understand it. Is that right, Mr. Geist? So we're going to go to item number 2 in closed session. I have no cards on item number 2. If anybody would like to present a card on item number 2, raise your hand. Seeing none, public comment on item number 2 is closed, and we'll be back with you in a few moments, folks.
I mean, there's no cards.
So if you're not here on item number 2, I'd like to ask that you please step out of the room for now.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
I was going to ask, the city attorney is asking whether or not there are specific questions to any of the items on item number 3. Any specific questions regarding the cases?
I'll address that later, but
okay.
I don't think we're able to ask case-specific questions on. Anyway, we'll discuss it in a moment. Okay, we're in closed session.
The city attorney needs to make the announcement.
No,
The
we're
city
now in
attorney
closed
said-
session. We need to turn off the microphones.
Right.
We're in closed
They
session.
typically make an announcement citing the specific code that allows you to go into closed session.
I'll read it off. The committee may recess into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D1 and or D4 to allow the committee to confer with its legal counsel on the following matters. Next item is item 3.
Before we go to item number 3, members, items 4 and 5 are potential consent candidates, unless anyone has any objections or questions about those items.
4 and 5?
Items 4 and 5.
I have no questions.
I think the only thing I'd like to add for item 5, there is an existing policy to have the controller weigh in on the need for a new special fund.
I'm sorry.
There's basically an existing policy, whereas the controller weighs in on creating new special funds. They do a little analysis on whether or not there's a need for a special fund. So you would amend the recommendation to instruct the controller to report back.
With regard to item 5?
Yes.
Huh?
I would not.
Yeah, I think they're fine. So,
So
without objection.
suspend council policy? I guess that's a yes.
Well, if we need to affirmatively take an action to do that, I think that's without objection. That would be the action of the committee.
And item 4 is also on consent.
Sorry.
And item 4 you were going to take on a consent.
Item 4 and 5, yeah, we can approve both of those items. So that brings us to item number 3.
I'd like to address item number 4.
Okay, did you submit a card, sir?
I'm sorry.
All right, we'll come back to that if we need to later. Let's go to item number 3.
Okay, item 3 is the city attorney report relative to the status of liability accounts as of December 31st, 2012.
Okay, Mr. Geis?
Mr. Chair?
So, members, you have a report on the liability accounts. There's also a confidential report that the city attorney prepares with regard to specific case matters. Those items should not be discussed at this point because they need to be discussed in closed session on an agenda that actually separately agendizes those individual matters. But we can have some general discussion about the status of the accounts. And I guess the first question I have is if you can, it seems like the small, I don't remember how we distinguish these, but the under $100,000 account, we seem to be fine for the rest of the fiscal year, and there's actually, it seems like you'll end the year with a surplus.
It seems, yes.
Okay, do you have some estimate of between now and the fiscal year how much more is expected to be spent out of that fund, or is that possible to do it?
Mr. Chair, I wish I did. That is the budget person in our office who is out today, and I'm here pinch hitting for any particular matter with regard to either the individual cases which you stated are in closed session or in a larger sense of the accounts. It's my understanding that she works the 9760 account on a straight line, which rarely computes to ending at a zero balance at the end of the year. And in speaking to her, there probably will be a surplus. The amount, I don't know.
All right. And maybe this is a question for the CAO. I don't know, but the CAO in the mid-year FSR projected that the liability claims account would have a $4 to $6 million shortfall. Can you reconcile that with the report that we have today?
Well, this report is of the end of the calendar year, and as you I'm sure know, there are several appeals that we have taken up that the federal court is expecting the amount to be covered by bond, and that is soaking up a great deal of the 9770 account. So in addition to the normal run-of-the-mill cases that are being settled, disposed of, we have these larger cases that we're taking on appeal from the federal court that require not only a bond, but many times a bond larger than the amount of the verdict and the attorney's fees.
And is the question whether those bonds will need to be posted prior to or after June 30th?
Yes.
Okay. So if they do need to be posted during this fiscal year, has any source of funding been identified to be able to meet those obligations?
That is, in fact, what Gemma Borzazi, who is our budget person, what she is responsible for doing. And yes, we keep a very close eye on that sort of thing. So, but that's the reason why this number appears to be large in comparison to where we are now.
Okay. All right. Anything further on this, members?
You're right on it? You're 100% behind it?
I'm sorry?
You're 100% behind it?
Behind
this issue?
Absolutely. I'm 100% behind this issue.
I just want to hear that, Gary.
Absolutely,
Mr.
Mr. Bunch.
All right. So without objection, we'll note and file the report.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 6.
Item number 6 is a CAO report relative to requesting authority for the Director of Finance to execute 7 contracts for collection services.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Emily Maeda with the Office of the CAO. Before you is a CAO report recommending approval of the Office of Finance's request to execute 7 contracts for primary and secondary collection services. The proposed agreements replace 4 existing primary collection contracts and 3 secondary collection contracts with 5 contractors. 4 of the 5 existing contractors submitted successful proposals. The 5th contractor did not respond to the RFP. There's 1 change to the recommendation. Finance has requested that the term be changed from the date of execution through March 30th, 2016 to 3 years from the date of execution. The proposed agreements are in compliance with the city's financial policies. The CAO recommends approval. The contractor's rates are in attachment A of the report. I'm available for any questions.
Good afternoon.
Wei Yi Lau with the Office of Finance. If you have any questions, we're certainly here to answer them on the collection contracts.
All right. And
Fernando Campos with the CAO's Office, Inspector General. I'm also here to support the execution or the approval to execute these contracts. I think there's a couple of improvements that have been made from the existing collection process, whereas there's a couple of recommendations to compress the time schedule to collect delinquent accounts. The current process is anywhere from 24 to about 30 months. The proposed contract before you recommends that the primary collection agencies retain the accounts for 9 months and the secondary collection agencies for 6 months, for a total of 15 months. So although this is an improvement from the existing process, the idea behind having an account less than 1 year, the likelihood of collecting it under 1 year is a lot higher than something post 1 year. There is an improvement, and I applaud the city for moving forward and taking a more aggressive time schedule, compressing it from 24, 30 months down to about 15 months.
So since we have several vendors who are subject to approval today, how will, if they are all approved, how will city departments choose among them in pursuing collections?
City departments will execute a business agreement. In the case of the fire department, they have a separate HIPAA full-length agreement, and they will decide which contractors they will be working with. They can choose any of the contractors on the list. The only thing is with the new contractors, they do have to work out with the different city departments the interface system to transfer files back and forth.
So would it be the expectation that each department would have an exclusive collections relationship with one of these agencies?
Or multiple agencies. We are suggesting that they try them all out to the extent possible if they can get those interfaces in place. It does take time to do it and see who performs the best for the types of contracts they have.
So while you may lose some efficiency of scale there, you gain the advantage of competition among the vendors to determine who is
not only the competition, but I think it also provides the menu of options to the departments for the first time to actually interface and also go out to more than a couple of collection agencies. Increasing our pool from the existing 5 to 7 gives them an opportunity to select vendors. Another great thing that's happening with the proposed contracts before you is that now the vendors are going to be required to submit performance data. So now the Office of Finance will now have performance data in which departments they can share with departments so that the decisions can be made in terms of who's performing great in account A versus who's not performing so well in account A. So now it's giving departments the opportunity to make the better choice for the city and the best interest for the city as well.
And presumably those results may vary with the type of account. There might be some vendors who are more effective with, different kinds of collections than others.
Absolutely.
Okay. none of these, well, only one of these is within the city of Los Angeles.
That's correct.
Why is that? Was there any outreach made to local, that was focused on local businesses? How many of the responding
The
businesses
outreach,
were local?
as our report indicated, we went to the industry as a whole, and of course, through the city's Bobbin system, firms can log on, indicate what types of services they're interested in providing, and whenever an RFP goes out, they will be notified. So they can also be very proactive in terms of seeking out opportunities in the city by logging on. And whatever department puts out any type of service, they will be notified through the system.
Okay, so of the 15 original proposers,
we
how
had 15
many?
proposals and 27 firms that attended the conference itself, but actually 15 proposals came in.
And do you have the breakdown as to those 27 or as to the 15, how many were LA-based?
No, I do not.
Okay. I'd like to know that.
Okay.
I don't know that it's pertinent to this exact approval, but
in the report here, there seems to be here the ones that we received, and then here's the ones not recommended. And none of them.
Take the total of those together. If you take the total of these two categories, that's the 15 that were
Right.
the original responders.
So none of there was
We
one
don't
in
have-
Calabasas.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But not the original 20. You're referring to just the 15 proposals where
No,
they based
we seem to have that.
Right, we have that, but not the
Pointed out,
27 that came to the bidders conference.
That would be interesting, of interest to me, if you
All
could
right.
provide that to me as well. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. England?
Just first of all, thank you for this, and I like the competitive nature in it, and hopefully it'll be helpful. I noticed also, just to walk me through the logistics, as an example with EMS, of the 7, 4 are HIPAA compliant. The other ones have indicated in their bids they'll become HIPAA compliant and sign the BAA, which is great, but who then does fire test out or start off with, or how are they of a full understanding within our own agencies and departments on how that's going to initiate, since they're not just given one name?
Fire department will decide who they want to work with. They currently have an agreement with one of the existing contractors. They can certainly execute additional agreements, but they do need to execute a separate agreement with whatever agency is going to work with because of the sensitivity of the HIPAA data.
I understand that, and it says here that they can do that, and they'll have to work out those business associate agreements separately if they're HIPAA compliant. But my question is, they've already got one agreement with one of them. What's the incentive for them to work with the others or try them out? I mean, how... Do we have any of that spelled out in terms
to try to increase collections?
I get the reason for it.
Right.
Let me rephrase the question. Yes, please.
I'm just trying to capture the question here in terms of the fire department making the decision into which agency they should use or if they should use all of them. I think the answer to that would be the performance data that we're now going to start requesting. For the first time, we're going to ask these departments or these agencies to provide the data on emergency medical services. So after the first month of collections, we'll have a data set there that we can share with the department. After a couple of months, we'll have more additional data so that the departments can make the best choice for themselves. I would encourage the fire department to have agreements with all collection agencies, not just one, as they currently do. So having these BCA agreements on file with all the 4 agencies and then complementing it with the performance data, at that point, the fire department can make the best selection as to which agencies they should send out their accounts to. In addition to that, they can also test pilot how they can distribute their accounts. They can select to send 25% of their entire portfolio to Company A, another 25% to Company B, to see which ones are actually collecting more and bringing a higher liquidation rate or a collection rate for them. So in terms of how do they know up front, I believe now we're actually providing that menu for them to make that decision, and then with the performance data, they'll be able to make better decisions as time progresses. Up front, I would have to discuss and probably defer with the Office of Finance in terms of what do we have in place so that they can make a decision which ones to use first. My recommendation is to have BCA agreements with all of them so that they can start making a decision and have a menu of options.
And with that, then, if there's any way when we vote to approve these contracts now, if we could, Mr. Chair, if you'd entertain this idea of somehow amending our approval to include the direction for the departments, just simply to urge them to contract with as many as possible, to work with our Department of Finance and our revenue czar, if you will, to ensure that they are, in fact, trying to work with as many as possible. We just urge them to do that in the form of the motion, not just accepting the contracts and then asking for that information. I would imagine we'll see reports back to this committee in some type of intervals. But just as a policy direction that we approve this but encourage our departments to work with as many as possible to try them out.
I think the approach makes sense. I don't know if I would recommend as many as possible.
There's only, for example, 4 that would be compliant.
And I think this issue is important. Just in follow-up to Mr. Englander's question, will this performance data be available as often as monthly? Will they be able to, on a monthly basis, to be able to evaluate these vendors one against the other?
We need to work out with all the agencies the information that they're giving us down to the simplest level, and we all need to make sure we're counting the same thing. Because as you know, with any statistical data, depending on what you're dividing, you're going to come back with different recovery rates. So that is something we're going to have to work out with all the agencies first. As far as how soon this performance data can be available, we also need to keep in mind that the interface system to bring on a different agency does take time to do, and it takes money and resources to do. So when we go back and encourage departments to use everybody, as to the extent possible, it goes back to also how soon can you get it done with your existing resources.
Yeah, there may be practical considerations, which is why I would, just a slight modification. I think we should include in our approval of these recommendations in our report a statement from this committee encouraging departments to maximize the competitive, how shall we phrase it? Maximize the ability to utilize a variety of vendors to ensure the greatest degree of performance.
To the extent possible.
Yeah, to the extent practically.
Good idea. And then
cost-effective.
I like that. I'll
Practical
second that. And then just so we have a policy statement.
Yeah, no, I think it's
do
good.
something. And then and to report back. We'll track that back in the committee as well. And then one other question that I
What's
had.
the frequency? Would you
What would the
that report back
suggest?
quarterly, semi-annual?
Why don't we start with quarterly, I think, at first.
May I suggest semi-annual? The reason why is these accounts on the primary referral, they get to keep them for 9 months. So for your new vendors, there is really no data, even on a semi-annual for the first year.
Okay.
So really, you're going to pick up data for the first year on your new vendor, probably not on your new vendors, but your existing vendors that have accounts with them.
That's fine. We'll see how that works on a semi-annual basis.
And then I had one last thing, if I could.
Sure, go ahead. We're actually not going to take action quite yet because we also have to hear Mr. Handel, who has a card on the call.
Of course. Thank you. One of the things that we're going to be going after here that we haven't ever in the past is delinquent parking citations, I believe. And we haven't done that. And that's part of the new RFP. I believe 3 of the 7 DMV are DMV compliant and have their codes already set up. And the others have ensured that if they're awarded the contract, they too would be able to do that. Do we have any idea of what that means in terms of delinquent parking citations and potential revenue? And would they be going to the biggest one out there, from my understanding, or one of the big pieces of delinquent citations that the city of LA doesn't capture is rental car companies for the renters that rent cars and are out of state, out of the country, whatever. We don't go after them at all. Will that be coming into the mix on this as well? Is that part of it?
I think it will. I'm going to go ahead and answer a portion of that, and then I'll let my counterpart from the Office of Finance to also take a stab at the question. In terms of DOT and the parking citation, the CAO's office is currently reviewing the proposed contract that the Department of Transportation has recommended for the parking citation processing and also the collections. For the first time also, the Department of Transportation has included in the RFP to have the outstanding delinquent accounts that are more than 455 days old, about 15 months, the same parallel to the timing here. They would be encouraged and required to move those accounts from the existing vendor into the city's collection agency pool. So in terms of whether we'll have that process in place, yes, we will have it in place. We will have collection agencies that can collect and also hopefully improve our collections revenue for parking citation. However, that is yet to be determined until the contract is considered by your council. So to answer that partially, yes, we are working on that. However, until the second piece is either approved or not approved by your council in terms of whether we require the proposed vendor to move those accounts from the proposed selected vendor to the city's collection pool, that's yet to be determined.
Yeah, there's certain parts of tourist zones where the signs are very confusing. And you're the Inspector General?
Correct.
I want you to go out to Hollywood one night. Where do you live? What part of the city?
I do not live in the city.
Well, where do you live, though?
I live in Downey, California.
Downey, it's a nice town, a lot of trees there. But you go out to Hollywood and just see the confusing signs that are there. And then I would support what you just said, Mitch, except parking meters there think, I got a space. But then down at the street light, which is at the rear of the building here in Relationship, there's a sign that says no parking from 6 to 8. The meter doesn't say don't park here. So it's a trap. It's an entrapment. And I'm offended, and I should do something about it, but you're the Inspector General, and since you got that title, I want you to do something about it. Because I want to be a fine city, not a fine city. You understand that?
I understand. And I am taking a look at parking citations as a whole. There is a separate report that's coming forward.
But it is not going to be within your jurisdiction to evaluate who should get tickets for what. Let's make that very clear.
Primary focus is improving collections.
Collecting those that are due. So
I would also suggest you do not set up a gold card.
Under any name.
It's an entrapment, though. I think it's wrong. I mean, what has happened to our city now is a challenge due to a lot of taxation. This is a serious point. But all of a sudden, how many people do you think, boy, if I call the fire department, that's $1,583 just if I have to transport. I'm going to call my brother, have him take me to the hospital, or something like this. Right. Because we have to charge. We used to never charge for anything, and I think we used to be fair with our tickets. I saw an officer give a ticket at 7:54.
Sorry, Mr. Black, we're way off topic.
No, but he's the Inspector General. I got that, but if he's
Inspector General of Collections.
Yeah, but that means he's going to collect things, and I just think
he doesn't have the authority to decide what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
But he has the
issue that's before us here is collecting debts that are owed to the city, not what should be owed to the city, but things that are already owed to the city. So we're going to go way off agenda if we talk about the underlying nature of the debts, and that's.
Let me just ask the collection agency, does anybody review what we collect from the city attorney's office?
At this point, not me. However, I can take a look at.
Big shot.
I can take a look at I can take a look at what we collect from the Office of City Attorneys.
Mr. Krikorian. Thank you, Mr. Krikorian.
Further on this? Mr. Rosendahl. Yes.
Yeah, if you turn to your report, page 3. And I'll read it to you. Currently, transportation does not refer delinquent parking citations to the city's collection agency due to an agreement with the citation processing agency that limits referrals to an outside collection agency. Transportation is currently working to implement a new contract that may include referral of delinquent parking citations to the city's secondary collection. In order to handle these accounts, a collection agency must obtain a requester code from the California Department of Motor Vehicles. Of the proposed 7 firms, 3 have DMV requester codes and can immediately begin collecting on delinquent parking citations. In addition, 4 firms that did not have a requester code indicated they would apply for one if awarded a contract. So tell us where we are. That's a big issue, is collecting these monies. And where is DOT on this? And how does this help us?
Well, I'm going to have the Inspector General answer where DOT is on it, because I'm not involved with that process on that particular contract. It's a separate contract.
Sure, right.
Right, and it's very similar to Councilman Englander's question in terms of referring the accounts. Currently, the Department of Transportation has made a recommendation to select a vendor. It has gone to the Office of the Mayor, and it's now in our office, the CAO's office, for review. That contract review should be completed within the next couple of weeks, and then we will submit our recommendation moving forward. Currently, the Department of Transportation has included that language in the RFP to ask the vendor, the proposed vendor, to release those accounts after 455 days, or about 15 months, sending them over to the Office of Finance collection pool. So if that contract is negotiated and executed and approved by your council in that fashion, in that manner, then yes, we will have that mechanism in place to automatically transfer those accounts from the selected vendor into the city's collection pool.
And you feel strongly that'll squeeze...
I am in support of that. However, until your council decides whether to approve that contract or not, it's yet to be determined.
Okay, great.
All right, let's go ahead and hear from Mr. Handel. If you three can just stay there in case there's follow-up questions after Mr. Handel speaks. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Jay Handel. I chair the Budget Advocates for this year for the neighborhood councils. I applaud the shortening of the time, but it's not enough on collections. Having run my own $95 million international business, I can tell you that after 12 months, it's dead in the water. My suggestion is, and I understand the RFP had already gone out, I believe the Inspector General would back a 6-month in a 6-month process, not a 9-month in a 6-month process. I would suggest you give them the flexibility to be able to go back to these vendors and talk to them about shortening it to a 6-month and 6-month process. I would also strongly recommend that you investigate the ability legally to sell off the debt after 12 to 15 months to someone who will give you something, as opposed to the write-offs that we continue to get because we can't collect anything. Something is better than nothing. My other comments are, as far as the Office of Finance and having all of these departments contract out independently, it's still the most insane thing I've ever seen. Would someone do a study and tell us how much money this city has written off in the last 5 years versus how much money you need to invest to centralize collections so that the department can actually be your Department of Finance, as opposed to having 38 departments of finance until it's too late, then it all goes to them. I think it's about cost management, and it may be better to invest the money up front to be able to centralize your collections in order to maximize your return on the outstanding liabilities. I don't believe anyone in the Office of Finance could tell you today how much money is out in collection and how much money is past due citywide. I don't think there's a number that any one person from that office could give you. Not their fault. Council's fault. You need to vote the money, centralize collections ASAP. And just as a quick side note to Councilman Labarge, as long as we have all the electronic meters in place, they're supposed to automatically turn themselves off during the no stopping, no standing, no parking time. And if they're getting tickets because the meters are on, then the meters aren't working right. Thank you.
I'd like to make sure you answer the question, that especially the one that he just made.
Yeah.
With regard to sale of the outstanding debt.
The agents into one.
Right. There are a couple of reports that are coming forth to your committee for consideration. One is a review of the Board of Review write-off consideration process over that 5-year period. In fact, that report has been completed. It's now in internal circulation. Once those comments are received, I will be submitting it to your committee for consideration. In addition to the debt sale, I agree. I believe that there is an opportunity now that we've compressed the cycle from almost 30 months down to 15 months. I believe there is an opportunity for the city to consider debt sale, auction sale, and also monetizing some of the assets. For example, cost sharing or even revenue sharing on some of these assets, selling it to a third-party broker to see if there's an opportunity for us to share revenue. There are vendors out there that specialize in this area. It's a niche area. So now that we've compressed the schedule, now we have that opportunity to start looking into that. One of the reports that I'm working on will be making that recommendation to ask the CAO's office, along with the Office of Finance and city attorneys, to iron out the details and what it will take to move forward and to also do auctions and debt sales and monetizing some of those assets.
Great.
What about centralizing it?
Centralization is definitely something that's number one on my platform. As you recall, I presented to this committee about a month and a half ago in terms of the collection reform strategic plan. I am working on the implementation plan, which has also been completed. It's now in circulation internally for comments. Once the top 10 areas of concern or top areas of focus, that report will return back to this committee for consideration. The number one is centralization of collections.
Great.
So the number one thing that I will be asking this committee to consider is investing in technology and also putting the tools in place so that the Office of Finance for the first time has a comprehensive view and overview of what the city's outstanding debt is. They currently don't have that tool in place.
And when would you expect to have those recommendations available for us?
Internal comments for 2 more weeks, and then the report probably another week, so 3 more weeks.
Very good. Very good. All right. If there's nothing further, members, then, Mr. Kretz.
Just a follow-up question on that. Will that be quickly enough that your recommendations could be included in this year's upcoming budget?
Doesn't sound like
that.
I have proposed some ideas. However, I don't believe the budget is released yet, so I don't know.
Yeah, the mayor is finalizing his budget, and we'll find out shortly, in about a week, what his budget entails.
Well, I think the question was, on the assumption that it's not included in the mayor's proposed budget, do we have time during our budget hearings to be able to
The answer is yes.
consider that?
I would hope so, yes.
And add it. And it sounds like it's an awfully difficult time frame to meet, but on the other hand, we can certainly do that separate from the budget if need be as well. It would be better, if we can, to hear that as part of our discussion with Finance during the budget process, but maybe at least you can provide us with some broad strokes at that point, even if you don't have very specific recommendations. You can provide us with some broad strokes, and we can take it from there.
Absolutely.
Okay. If there's nothing further, then it will be the action of the committee to approve the CAO's report with the addended instruction from the committee to the various departments with regard to utilization of the vendors.
As well as a time frame on the contract from date of execution with 2 one-year options for renewal. That change. Thank you.
All right. And without objection, that'll be the action of the committee. Thank you all.
So actually, if we go back to item 4, I think originally we were going to have a card, but I guess the individual declined.
I don't know if the gentleman is still here. Is the gentleman who wanted to speak on item 4 still present? If so, wave your hand. I don't see him, so we don't need to reopen that matter.
I actually would like, if the committee could actually reopen the matter, I would like to add one instruction, and that on number 4, and that is basically to authorize the CEO to make any technical corrections as necessary. That's all.
Then, if there's no objection, we'll reopen consideration of item number 4. And then restate it, if you would, please, Mr. Serrano.
I move we authorize the CAO to make any technical correction.
All right.
Thank you.
And it's been moved and seconded, and without objection, that will be the action of the committee.
Great, thank you.
Anything else before the committee?
That is it.
All right. Thank you very much. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Very good.